Hey, what's going on, guys? Today we'll be taking a look at competitive programming. So this will be the first video on this channel in this field, and today we'll be taking a look at a super basic question from CodeChef. So CodeChef is actually an online, like you could think of it as a repository of questions where you can practice and like begin to learn competitive programming. We'll be going through multiple of these so-called like almost repositories. They're actually called judges, online judges, and we'll be taking a look at a bunch of them. But CodeChef is one of the most popular right at the moment, and they have tons of questions. They also have contests and other things, so you can check it out. I'll leave a link in the description below. And before I begin, we'll be working in C++, and I'm working obviously in Visual Studio Code. But if you don't have that, and if you just want it on a browser, a great one that I recommend is actually C++ shell, so cpp.sh. I'll also link this down below. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So we're obviously going to start off the file by saying include IOStream. So for most competitive programming questions, including IOStream, that's mainly the only library you're going to use. Sometimes you might need to use the math library, and sometimes you might need to use hashtag include IO manip. And then I'm also going to use using namespace std because it just saves a lot of time. Okay, I cannot spell namespace std. Okay, and we're going to initialize int main. Okay, so the question is, I just put the question. Pooja would like to withdraw X US dollars from an ATM. The cash machine will only accept the transaction if X is a multiple of 5. And Pooja's balance has enough cash to perform the withdrawal, including bank charges. For each successful withdrawal, the bank charge is 0.5 US dollars. Calculate Pooja's account balance after an attempted transaction. So for the input, the first line is going to consist of X, which, as I say, it has some specifications, some limits we're going to have to work with then. And in the same line, we're also going to have a Y, which also has some limits, and it also has 2 digits of precision. And for the output, it's just going to be a single line. So we're just going to print out the balance, and if it went through, we'll subtract the withdrawal amount. So here are some examples. The examples actually are great. I think you should check them out for each single question because sometimes the inputs and outputs aren't particularly clear, but these make it super clear. So now let's open up our editor. Actually, how about we do a side-by-side? So we can see both. Okay. So now that we have that, we can actually initialize our variables. So we're going to use an int x for the x, and this is because even if you look here, this is always an integer. The 42, the 30, they're always integers. 300. Whereas we'll try and use a double or a float, either works. I'm just going to use a float y, and it's actually easier to just stick with whatever variables they give you because it's just easier to follow, and when you're reading through the question and actually doing the question, it's easier. So now we're going to get the input, so that's going to be C in X, and to get the input in the same line, it's going to be C in Y. So for those of you who don't know, what this does is that it says X, so it's going to take an input, if I can whip, okay, so it's basically, let's say they're asking me for input here, so I can say like 20, and once I leave a space, it goes on to the Y. So now if I say something like 40, the 20 is the X, and then the 40 is the Y value. So it's actually quite neat. And you don't need to do multi-line inputs. So now we're going to start off with the big if statement. And this is because we have to work with these specifications that have been given. So I'm just going to make a simple if statement. So if X is greater or equal to 0, and so the AND statement, which is just an and symbol twice, and X is greater or equal to 2000. And we're going to have to repeat this AND statement twice. Actually, we can just copy paste this because they have the exact same requirements. So we can just change this to Y and change this also to Y. We can initialize to if. So this program will only run if this happens. Okay, so now we can make another if statement in here, and this if statement will actually deal with the part where it says if there's not enough money in the account. Oops, that's a little bit too little to see. So it just says if there's enough account to make the transaction, then output the balance. So what you would want to do here is and we also have to keep in mind that x is a multiple of 5. So let's actually do that one first. So x modulus 5 is equal to 0. So what this does is that it divides x by 5, and it basically gets a remainder of that. So if it's divisible by 5, obviously the remainder is going to be 0 because it's going to be perfectly divisible. And we're going to have to use the and statement again because there's 2. So, and y must be greater or equal to. No, my bad. And then x must be less than or equal to y minus 0.50. So you may ask why we're doing this particular one. And this is, oh, I actually deleted this one. There we go. So this is actually because if you take a look at the question, it charges 0.50. So obviously, the withdrawal must be less than the balance minus 0.50. Because let's say, if you take a look at which question is good for this, if you take a look at actually all of these questions, there's not really one, but let's say you had your x, so you had your withdrawal amount. You had your withdrawal amount as let's say 39.5 and your balance was 40. Well, the problem here is that this transaction will actually, no, let's just say you had actually 40. You have 40 and 40. So this transaction actually won't be able to go through because there's going to be that 40 plus that 0.05 of a charge. So that's going to make this 40.5. So obviously 40.5 is greater than 40, and we don't want that to happen because then we'll end up with a negative balance. This question does not want us any negative balance. So if this happens, what we're going to do is actually we're going to output y minus x minus 0.5. Well, you might be saying, like, why can't you just make a variable for this? Well, you could, but in competitive programming, code really isn't usually most readable because you have a fixed time limit. If you're doing it on CodeChef, you can definitely add a variable for that as well, but I just think it makes things more messy, especially for such an easy question like this. It's more of a beginner question. But if you see, we still haven't met one of the requirements, which is to 2 digits of precision. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, what we have to do is first do cout.setf. I have to close that iOS fixed, and then we're going to have to do cout.precision is 2. That's going to print it out with precision of 2 because obviously we know the dollars are something like 5.05. It can be 5.50. That's because we only have things as small as a penny. So now that we're done that, this is most of a question. Well, the last thing we need to do is just say, well, what if this isn't the case? So if this isn't the case, we can just use a simple else statement. Actually this else statement would have to be inside of here because the question, you must meet these basic requirements or else it won't even output the balance back. So what you would have to do is actually just copy this whole thing, just paste it here, and just say y instead. So you don't subtract it. So all you're doing here is you're just printing the balance back with precision of 2. So you could have just rewritten the code, but it's just easier to copy and paste. So let's see if this code runs. So I'm running it in my terminal here. Let me run that again. Okay, so let's just use one of their things with one of the examples they have given. 120.00. Okay, 89.5. That's so it's looking good. Let's just try another one. I have one that's perfectly different. Okay, let's try this one. 300 and then 120.00. So it returns 120.00. Okay, so now you would want to submit this, and how you do is you would go into CodeChef. Let me just expand this window. So you would go into submit. I already have this check mark because I've done this question, but you would have to submit, and all you need to do is just copy your code. If you're working in CodeShell, just Control A and then Control C. Copy all your code, paste it inside of here. This is their this is where you can insert code, and you also might be working in the IDE mode, which just provides you with a bit more syntax and it looks a bit more cleaner. But I found that it takes longer to judge that, or the alternative could be just choosing a file from right here. Just click it and then choose your CPP file, and make sure for sure it's C++14, because if you don't, it's gonna use another language, and the C++ usually isn't the first one. It's usually some other language. Yeah, it's sometimes C because it's first alphabetical order. So make sure it's that, or else you might have the right code, but it might keep giving you the wrong answer. So just gonna paste this, and let's see if it runs. It actually takes a bit of time to judge, so I'll show you the results once it has been judged. Okay, so as you can see, it's showing me correct answer and execution time. And I just want to end off this video by saying this last thing. So what I've noticed is that in competitive programming, most online judges um, will not tell you exactly what problem there is, unless there's a syntax error, in which case they'll actually tell you exactly at what line and what character it is on. But if that is not the problem, they will not tell you. And once you look at other judges, there's going to be test cases, and they'll only tell you that you failed in those test cases. It won't show you like what you did wrong, basically. So that's one very interesting aspect to programming, because you don't really know what you did wrong, and you sometimes need to redo the whole program, even though like you had 95% of it correct. But we'll be discussing that in a future episode. So stay tuned to that, and thanks for watching, and peace.